I've taken an entire year's worth of biology curriculum and compiled it into 40 video lectures for you. The video series covers every single NGSS life science standard, and it's available exclusively for you on teacherspayteachers.com. Link is in the description. So again, if you or somebody you know would benefit from this, spread the word.
Especially the New Testament has manuscripts that, granted, were not the original, but copies made within only just a few years. And we have some of these manuscripts still in libraries and museums throughout the world.
The oldest known complete copy of the Gospels is from the 400s, I think. It might be the 300s. Mm-hmm. I think it's 3rd century, so that's 400s.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, that would be the 200s. That's not right. Let me look it up. It's the one that's named after the Vatican. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. Of the Gospels. I always forget what it's called.
So I'm not necessarily referring to like a complete work. What I'm referring to specifically is we have pieces of papyrus.
Yeah, like P152.
Yeah. Okay. So you're familiar. So all.
Yeah, but it's this big.
So that's fine. That's not really an issue for me. What I'd like your reaction to is if we know that this is a copy that was made within very close to the 1st century, if not the 2nd century. and these manuscripts agree. And the margin of error is extremely small, only for punctuation and grammar. The New Testament has the most agreeing manuscripts in history. Tens of thousands of manuscripts that we have today. So can I get your reaction on why you in light of the manuscripts that it seems like you're very well aware that we have these things in museums, libraries across the world?
Yeah, like the manuscript copies exist. And when people say, this is an extremely complicated question because it comes down to like, what exactly what do we mean by they agree? Do they just broadly tell the same story? Then it's like, I mean, okay, like the 4 Gospels broadly tell the same story, but they contradict in crucial ways as well. Now, we're not talking about that. We're talking about to what degree the manuscripts and whatever have been preserved. And so it's like, is it just about the overall story? Or like if we nitpick at a finer detail, it's like, well, the only real discrepancies are in the punctuation or whatever, and that's not that big of a deal. I know I've seen lots of content that people have put out, such as like Dan McClellan, for example, where he goes over that, well, those discrepancies can be, it can be like literally one thing, but it may change the entire meaning of something. So, for example, like the Johannine comma, that's not in any original manuscript, and a lot of Bibles leave it out because they accept that the original author never said that. Now, why is that important? Because it's really the only thing explicitly in the Bible that tries to say this is the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity. Okay. And I think that's important because modern Christianity is this Trinitarian view that they settled on in the early 300s or whenever that was. And if the Bible doesn't really say explicitly that, then something's been added to change the meaning of. Now all of a sudden, with that addition, people go and they go in the Old Testament and they say, yeah, the Spirit hovering over the waters or whatever, that was the Holy Spirit, and Jesus was whatever, the voice that you hear or something like that. Like it literally changes for them huge amounts of other things. So quite a minor change has huge effects. And there are other, I don't know, there are other stories like the woman caught in adultery. Almost certainly that never happened. It's almost certainly not original because you can't find it in anything for hundreds and hundreds of years. I've heard that it doesn't appear in anything until like the 1300s, but then I was researching it and I saw that somebody was saying it's actually in some manuscripts that were dated to like the 400s or whatever, so I don't know exactly, but in either case, it seems to be a very unoriginal story.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine with me. What I take issue with in your lives, you'll have to forgive me. I haven't sifted through any of your posts on TikTok, but what I take issue with in your lives is that I see the banner above your head that regularly says that the Bible is either not reliable or inaccurate or the Bible sucks, and it is still my understanding that is not true. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go back to we have, and you pointed out how big they are, and like that's not an issue for me. I don't care if we don't have the whole thing. What I'm saying is we have fragments, pieces that are dated to extremely close to within the lifespan of these people who claimed to walk and talk with Jesus of Nazareth.
Well, we don't have anything from those time periods.
Right.
We have things that are like P152. It's dated to like 160-ish or something like that, like middle of the 2nd century or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's like the size of a stamp. It's extremely tiny. So
I realize that we don't have any originally penned by Paul or John or things like that. I realize that we don't have any originals, but wouldn't it be easy to falsify in the year 160 AD that would be bullshit? The people
falsify what?
The claim of like, hey, this is my account of, or this is our copy. We went back as best as we could to the originals to make a copy. And this is the message of the people who walked and talked with Jesus of Nazareth, who wrote down stuff. I went back and I made a copy, and here's what it says. Wouldn't it be simple to falsify that claim at the time?
No, it'd be extremely difficult because almost everybody was illiterate, so there weren't any records of anything. So if you had a written record of something, you had probably the only record of it, and the only thing you could do is go around and interview people. But interviews, the words go into the atmosphere and then they disappear forever. So only through a kind of oral tradition could you ever hope to have anything that stands against what the people wrote down. But we also know for a fact, because like 1st century and 2nd century church fathers were saying this out loud, like Origen and others, that people willingly change the scriptures to fit whatever narrative that they have for themselves. So we don't know what the original scriptures said, and like you say, that's not a big deal. But like in terms of like, did Jesus exist? Yeah. Was he crucified by the Romans? Yeah. Was his body ever found? I guess I doubt it. Did he resurrect? No, I don't think so. He resurrected at all. But like I'll give you whatever stories, a lot of the stories, and well, not whatever story, because there's so many things that obviously never happened, like the census and the fleeing to Egypt. That story makes absolutely zero sense. But I'll give you a lot of the historical things, but none of that would substantiate, and therefore Jesus was God, and therefore he actually did resurrect Lazarus from the dead and things like that. But Christopher Hitchens also makes this point: I'll grant you every miracle, and it won't prove that Jesus was who you think he was either, because there were many supposed miracle workers in his day, and there have been many others in other religious traditions. So Jesus isn't super unique in that aspect either.
I must disagree though in your point when you said like, hey, listen, if the Bible is a reliable manuscript, which I still, if you have a couple more moments, I would still like to combat that. But if the New Testament specifically is a reliable manuscript, then these are people who have walked and talked with Jesus, and Jesus said that he is, before he existed before Abraham, and he never stopped people from bowing down to worship him or pray to him, which would be blasphemous to a first century Jewish man, and said that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. So these are paramount claims to be on par with God. So that stands to reason, unless you see some kind of chink in this logic, that if the Bible is a reliable manuscript that we can place early enough to see the reliability of that, it tells an account of a first century Jew who said he was God, and then was crucified, right? It was capital punishment of the state at the time.
Yep.
And then those same people reported that they knew that he was alive again after his execution.
Right. So I would say the various problems with that would be that almost no scholar of the Bible thinks that his disciples wrote the Gospels. It was penned by people that weren't them, because it was penned in a language that they didn't speak. There's the argument that Matt might have known some of that Koine Greek or whatever it's called. And there are some people I think that Matt is the oldest gospel too, and that sort of helps that argument. But I think it's more compelling that Mark is the earliest gospel. But that stuff about Jesus, like apparently explicitly making claims of divinity, only occur in John, and John is by far the most different of the gospels, and it reads like a gospel that was written for. It reads like a propaganda piece. I mean, it really does, to try to convey a very specific message, because it's the only one. It's the one that contains that Johannine comma. The others don't. It's the only gospel where Jesus says, "Before Abraham, I was." You also see there are many themes, like the story of John the Baptist gets, like, his character is viewed in very high regard and is very exalted, like in Mark, and then less so in Matthew, and then less so in Luke, and then the least of all in John. There's also the fact that when Jesus was baptized, for example, in earlier Gospels, God says, "On this day I have begotten you." He says that to Jesus. And then we know that they changed it within some Gospels, and in later Gospels, I'm not going to remember exact quotes, but sometimes they just changed what was said. And God just says something like, "And I love you." They get rid of the begotten thing because Jesus is supposed to be, eternal. And so they take out the part where God says, "Today I have begotten you," because like, oh no, that screws up our Christology or whatever. There's too many things to keep this on track. But when I look at like the Gospels in terms of being reliable in the sense that these are basically real places, and a lot of the events, yes, I do think really happened, but that doesn't grant, to me, that doesn't in any way strongly grant credence to the idea that Jesus really was divine, or that he really resurrected. I mean, sure, the resurrection stories, that would be kind of a mess to go through, but fair. Those are, there's so many problems with those too.
That's fine. I more actually want to lean back onto like the early manuscripts, copies of the Bible, because I still take issue with that with you. Namely, okay, let me see if I can be succinct. The amount of extremely early pieces of parchment or papyrus that we have today, not original copies, sure, not actually penned by John or Matthew, sure, fine. but extremely early, and they all tend to agree. And when I say agree, I mean if I were to grab my Bible off the shelf at my house here, and if we were to try to go translating the Greek or into the English, that it would be accurate, and it would be the same, that the message would translate over into English like I have in my Bible on the shelf. So I take issue with that.
Like a story that a guy who went, I mean, his name wasn't Jesus, but a guy named Jesus living in that area preached, was an apocalyptic Jewish preacher, was crucified by Rome and resurrected. You will find consistency in that story. But the consistency of the story, I don't think, is good supporting evidence that all of those events happened. Because, I mean, like, there are, and again, the real issues are the issues with, like, the resurrection and the divine nature of him, because the Gospels differ in significant ways about that. But I mean, also, if we look at, like, you talk about early, like, we have so many copies of early manuscripts. I mean, like, 90% of our manuscripts come from after the 10th century. If we look at the first few hundred years, none from the 1st century, 2 fragments from the 2nd century, 6 fragments from the 3rd century, and then we get up to 30 from the 3rd. And I don't know, like I said, the oldest complete gospel, I think, ranges from the year 400 something like that. I don't exactly remember, but anyways.
Okay. I'm curious to know where you pulled that information from.
I've heard it repeated tons of times. There's this really interesting graph of it. I'm looking at Wikipedia right now because I was trying to find a really quick source, and that was just the first one I clicked on that was actually like legible. But there's this pretty famous graph. Date of each manuscript graph. Yeah, where does this come from? Evangelical Textual Criticism.com? .blogspot.com. Yeah. Distribution of New Testament manuscripts by century. And it shows the graph, and it looks like this, and then it goes way up starting in the
I'm trying to look at something that you're looking at. I'm trying to find it again. You said distribution of
Google date of each manuscript graph.
Okay.
And I went to Google Images, and I just clicked on the first image. The colors are predominantly green and purple.
I see.
On the graph.
Yeah, evangelical textual criticism. Okay, I see. Percentages and okay. I'll look at this later. But also I just okay. So you're speaking to me now in this conversation a little bit more giving than what I understand your position on the Bible to be. So why does the Bible suck then?
So with regard to our scientific explanations about the world, what the Bible appears to say, according to some people's interpretation, couldn't be more false. So it sucks in that regard. Not created in 6 days, not 6,000 years old. Humans were not, the first person evolved was not made of mud. The first woman was not made of a piece of his rib. The Exodus did not happen. The Tower of Babel could not have happened. Noah's flood literally could not have happened. And then, like in the New Testament, there are, I mean, the miracle claims are just as silly as any miracle claim by, I don't know, somebody that believes in Thor, or the miraculous claims contained in the Quran, for example. So that's what I mean by the sucky part of it. Although I do think there are also quite a lot of verses that if we, to make it simple, if we started living more biblically, I think we would create a worse world.
You know, I may agree with that. I don't know about following every single thing about the whole entire Bible through and through in my own life. For example, I don't know if the law of the Torah actually applies to me because I'm not Jewish. So I don't know if the Torah specifically applies literally to me. But I would say that if I emulate my life according to the life and teachings that of my understanding of how Jesus is in the Bible, that and if we actually loved our neighbor as our, love God and love other people, then that would exponentially improve society.
Yeah, I think there are moral philosophies of Jesus that are good, but I think there are others that are bad. Like, I come to divide house against itself and things like that. If you don't believe in me, then abandon whatever else. Here's something else that's really interesting. This is kind of hard to read, so I'll just tell you what it is. They asked people, do you think that we are better off with the Bible or without the Bible? And so people either said we're better off without it, that's red, not sure, that's the like navy blue or whatever, and then worse off without the Bible, that's the light blue. And then, like I said, you can't really read this. Actually, I can't really read it.
I can see it pretty good. But
let me make myself bigger, so we can all kind of see this.
Who was pulled? Was this just like a 15-minute poll in? Yeah, where?
In the United States.
Okay, so just
so what they said was they asked them, are you? It's like sort of your willingness to go along with these. These are like, I don't know, social ideas, I guess. Welcome immigrants into the community. Befriend people of other races. All the way at the bottom, be a good neighbor, like a good Samaritan, whatever. And what's really fascinating is the people that think we'd be worse off without the Bible. I don't want to say this.
I see.
They went along with these ideas less so than anybody else. It's really, I don't know why, but it's very awkward to say, because they don't say these are bad ideas. They just agree with them less than people that think we'd be better off without the Bible. And that's just so incredibly ironic.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you brought up something about Noah's flood. So, what is your awareness of fossilized, sea creatures that are at an elevation that they do not belong at? Like it is.
That's just plate tectonics.
So the shifting around of the plate. So they had died underwater, and then the Earth's crust just shifted around.
Yeah. Yes, we can just say yes.
Okay. All right, I'm satisfied.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.